So, May 9th. For Russia, it's Victory Day, marking the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II.
Right. A hugely important date.
But this year, the whole atmosphere feels different. It's thick with the tension from the ongoing war in Ukraine. It's created a really unusual backdrop.
Absolutely. It's not just looking back at history anymore, is it? It's seeing that history colliding quite violently with what's happening right now. This Victory Day feels heavy.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. We've been looking at a bunch of sources, news reports, some deep analysis, statements from leaders, and they all paint a really complex picture. You've got Ukraine actively pushing back right up to the symbolic day. Then there's Zelensky's pretty firm stance, and Russia trying hard to keep this powerful historical story going.
And what's so interesting, I think, is how these things weave together. The history for Russia, Ukraine's actions now, the current fighting, it all tells us a lot about where things stand.
Let's dive straight into Ukraine then. What have they been up to? Just before Victory Day, we saw this surge of drone attacks near Moscow.
Yeah, Moscow itself and the surrounding areas.
Moscow's mayor, Sobyanin, he reported, downing 19 drones in one night. It even shut down airports. That feels pointed.
It certainly seems like a strategic signal, doesn't it? It's likely Ukraine showing resolve, especially with, the situation on the ground being so fluid and questions about long-term support.
So a way of showing they can still reach deep into Russia, disrupt things.
Exactly. Hit that sense of security right before their big day.
And President Zelensky, he didn't hold back. He basically said Ukraine couldn't guarantee the safety of any foreign leaders coming for the Moscow parade.
Right, putting the responsibility squarely back on Russia.
He even suggested that Russia might stage something, a provocation, and then try to pin it on Ukraine. That's quite an accusation.
It is, and it really speaks volumes about the level of, the total lack of trust and the potential for things to escalate unpredictably. He's highlighting how unstable it all is.
And he went further, didn't he? Calling the parade itself a parade of cynicism, full of bile and lies.
Yes, and drawing those stark parallels.
Between current events, he mentioned Bucha, the siege of Mariupol, and Nazi atrocities, like the siege of Leningrad. Wow, that comparison hits hard.
It really does. The Leningrad siege is such a deep, traumatic part of Russian memory. Millions of Soviet civilians died. So linking alleged current atrocities to that directly challenges Russia's whole narrative, the idea they're fighting some kind of new Nazism.
And then there's the symbolic move, Ukraine officially shifting its own WWII victory commemoration to May 8th.
Aligning with Western Europe.
That feels like another deliberate step away from the Russian or Soviet interpretation of history.
Precisely. It's a clear act of distancing themselves from that shared Soviet past and how they remember the war. It's about aligning with a broader European view.
But it's interesting, even with all this conflict, these symbolic breaks, Ukraine's parliament unanimously approved a major minerals deal with the U.S.
Yeah, that's quite a signal about looking forward, isn't it?
Seems like it. Focusing on the future.
Absolutely. Despite the immediate, brutal reality of the war, they're clearly thinking long-term. Economic strategy, reconstruction. That deal gives the U.S. access to critical stuff, sure, but it's also about potential future investment in Ukraine. It's a powerful statement.
Okay, let's shift focus to Russia and Victory Day itself. It's arguably their most important national holiday, commemorating the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany.
Absolutely central to national identity.
And President Putin, he's consistently used this day, hasn't he, to draw lines between that war and the current one in Ukraine, framing it as still fighting Nazism to protect the motherland.
We saw that clearly in his 2022 speech, and it's been the refrain ever since.
That historical framing is key to how the Kremlin justifies the invasion.
It's absolutely central. By painting Ukraine's government or Ukraine itself as somehow Nazi, they try to legitimize their actions to their own people, tapping into that immense pride about World War II.
And despite everything, they're still planning the big military parade in Red Square. Leaders from China, Brazil, expected to attend, Xi Jinping, Lula.
Yeah, that's a deliberate show, projecting international support, showing they aren't completely isolated.
But it's not all smooth sailing there either. The Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they plan to close their airspace to some of those flights.
Citing safety concerns, yeah. Which really just highlights the underlying tension, doesn't it?
It does. And it's interesting, you have this grand display planned in Moscow, but then we hear reports about Victory Day events being canceled or scaled back in other parts of Russia.
All right. In several regions, Moscow region itself, Vladimir Putin, others.
And the reasons cited are things like drone threats, sometimes weather, even internet restrictions. We heard about memorial services moved, school events canceled, the Immortal Regiment march off in some places.
Concerts postponed, too, to Mordovia. It seems to, well, it slightly contradicts that image of absolute strength and control they want to project from Moscow.
It suggests the war's impact is being felt domestically. Those drone threats are real enough to force changes.
Definitely. The drone threat is clearly a serious concern. And the mention of internet restrictions is interesting, too, maybe trying to manage information flow.
And speaking of drones, Russia's defense ministry put out a claim destroying over 500 Ukrainian drones in just one day. Called it the biggest attack yet.
Yeah, massive numbers claimed. Some pro-war bloggers were reporting even higher figures.
So whether the numbers are exact or not, it points to incredibly volatile airspace, a huge amount of aerial activity.
It suggests a major escalation in that aspect of the war, the scale of drone warfare, and the challenge of defending against it for both sides.
Okay, now what about that ceasefire? Russia announced a unilateral one 72 hours, right around Victory Day, starting May 7th.
They did announce it, yes.
But it didn't really stick, did it?
No, not at all. Ukraine dismissed it almost immediately, called it a manipulation, a farce.
Basically saying it was just PR, to make the parade look safer.
That was their take, yeah. And sadly, the reports from the ground, from both sides, indicated fighting continued right through the first day of this supposed truce.
Ukraine accused Russia of, over 700 violations by midday Thursday, reported civilians killed in bombings in Sumy.
And Russia, in turn, accused Ukraine of attacking its positions, so they'd just mirror whatever Ukraine did.
So, a ceasefire in name only, really.
It really just underlines the deep, deep mistrust. There's no real commitment to de-escalation there. It failed just like previous attempts, like that U.S. brokered one back in March. Shows how hard any pause is to achieve right now.
Looking at all this, it's hard not to think about the bigger historical picture, the echoes. This year is the 80th anniversary of VE Day in Europe, May 8th. And the mood around those commemorations, it feels different this year, too. There's this sense of unease because of the war in Ukraine. Germany's President Steinmeier even talked about how fragile peace is.
That unease is definitely there. The peace Europe's mostly known since WWII feels really threatened by a major war on the continent again.
Yeah.
It makes remembering the end of that last huge conflict, well, more somber. A reminder of the stakes.
And this is where that analysis from the Davis Center seemed particularly relevant. They drew some really striking and frankly disturbing parallels between the Soviet Red Army in WWII and Russian forces in Ukraine now.
Yeah, it's quite a critical look.
They point to patterns like aggression met with unexpectedly fierce resistance. Poland and Finland back then, Ukraine now.
Right, that initial phase.
But it goes deeper. They talk about, quote, gratuitous brutality towards civilians, atrocities, massacres, documented in WWII, and tragically, what we've seen documented in places like Bucha, Mariupol, Kharkiv now.
And they note Putin reportedly awarding medals to military units implicated in some of these current abuses.
Which has echoes of Soviet practices, they argue.
It's a chilling comparison. And the point about using rape as a tool of warfare.
Also deeply disturbing. The Davis Center mentions historical accounts from the Red Army's advance, and then the reports emerging from Ukraine now, even with Kremlin denials.
Then there's the parallel about soldiers being treated as, well, cannon fodder.
Stalin's disregard for Soviet lives in WWII, compared to reports of Russian soldiers sent into Ukraine, maybe not even knowing it was a full invasion. High casualties, using conscripts despite promises.
Yeah, that comparison is drawn too. And finally, mass looting.
Right. They connect the Red Army taking goods across Eastern Europe and Germany after WWII, sometimes framed as reparations, with the widespread reports today of Russian soldiers stealing everything from washing machines to grain in Ukraine.
It's a troubling set of parallels.
And the Ukrainian World Congress, they've strongly condemned Russia for, as they put it, repeating its brutal history and twisting the memory of the enemy defeated in WWII.
So Ukraine is very much aware of these historical echoes and is actively pointing them out.
For them, it's not academic, is it? It's lived reality, which makes Russia using WWII rhetoric feel deeply ironic, offensive even.
Absolutely.
And beneath all this, the strategy, the history, there's the devastating human cost. The UN Secretary General reported a big jump in civilian casualties globally in 2023, and Ukraine was a huge part of that.
Huge. Hundreds killed, tens of thousands displaced just in the first couple of months of this year, 2025.
The specific examples are just awful. Drone strikes in Kiev killing a mother and child, guided bombs in Sumy killing civilians, glide bombs in Donetsk.
These aren't abstract numbers. Each one is a life, a family shattered.
And we're also seeing this worrying trend globally, more violence against aid workers, journalists. 2024 was apparently the deadliest year on record for them.
Really highlights how dangerous these conflict zones are and the immense difficulty in getting humanitarian aid to people who need it.
And that aid work faces huge challenges anyway, right? Chronic underfunding, made worse sometimes by shifts in priorities, like U.S. aid cuts.
Exactly. Plus, you have the politics. Geopolitical divisions, say in the UN Security Council, make it hard to get accountability for violations of international law. And there are even fundamental disagreements about the principles for giving aid. It's a tough environment for humanitarians.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, the picture around this Victory Day is incredibly complex, isn't it? You have this hugely important holiday for Russia tied to a historical story that's now being directly challenged by Ukraine's resistance and narrative.
We've seen the drone attacks pushing back, a ceasefire that just evaporated, and these really unsettling echoes of past conflicts being highlighted.
And we absolutely have to remember the immense human cost, the suffering, and the real difficulties faced by international efforts trying to protect people and uphold basic laws amid all this.
The challenges are enormous.
It really leaves you thinking, considering these historical parallels, the ongoing brutality, what does Victory Day actually signify in 2025? What does it mean today? And what are the longer-term consequences for Europe, for peace, when history is being weaponized and contested so violently? It's certainly something to reflect on.